Well, my news alerts this week seem to go off every few minutes, announcing another action by the new Trump administration. Justice Department lawyers fired or reassigned. Inspector generals, too, they lose their job. A new investigation is launched into the prosecution of the January 6 defendants. Federal money payouts were paused during havoc on Tuesday. A bunch of suits were filed, and then the next day they were all rescinded. Lisa, what's happening to the rule of law and the balance of powers?
Well, I get asked about the rule of law a lot, particularly about the courts and whether they're moving fast enough and doing enough in this environment. And what I say to people is, the rule of law is not just about the courts. The framers designed a system where all three branches would do their part to uphold the rule of law. And what we have now, of course, is a president who's willing to smash through norms like we've never seen before, and a Congress that at worst is happy to exceed or at best impotent. And this is increasing pressure on the courts, which I believe continues to do an admirable job of enforcing and defending the rule of law. And by the way, the fact that, I vehemently disagree with any particular judicial ruling, even the fact that a judicial ruling is wrong, doesn't mean that the system is failing or that the courts are failing. The point is, the system was not designed for, for tyranny on the part of the president and abdication on the part of the Congress. So I'm going to continue to defend the courts and note that they are under pressure to a very significant extent because of the abdication, or worse, of the other branches.
Tara, what about the independence of the Justice Department? That seems to have been a tradition that's really being overturned.
You've described it absolutely accurately. Through reassignment, through firings, through encouraging to resign. Basically, that's exactly what the president and many of his, and I have to be careful because I don't say Republicans, because not all Republicans are saying they agree or really do agree with everything that the president is doing. But certainly in terms of the president's supporters, that's exactly what has happened. Is he is either appointing or by encouraging or firing people who will simply agree or do what he wants to do instead of upholding the rule of law and recognizing that, yes, there are three branches of the federal government, that Congress has a role, that, yes, sometimes even in your role as an employee of the Department of Justice, you may have to investigate, including the man who sort of officially is your boss. And in doing that, he is undermining what used to be for the most part, independence in terms of influence of the Department of Justice. And that really is a violation of the rule of law and what was intended by the founders.
None of this is a surprise. He campaigned on burning it all down, on gutting the whole system, and that's exactly what this last week has looked like for us. And I want to talk about backstops, right? Because we're all kind of wondering, like, are courts the backstop? But there is kind of another backstop here. The funding freeze that came in Monday night, all of a sudden from the Office of Management and Budget, all federal grants need to stop. I got an email from the federal government. I receive a federal grant. I do research under a federal grant. Stop all activity, right? Yes, the courts issued a stay, but that's not why the Trump administration rescinded that order. They rescinded it because they're getting calls from Republican governors saying, hey, grants to our police forces are going to get shut down. What's going on? They got a lot of pushback that was not fully bipartisan, but more bipartisan. And it was a really bad look. People all of a sudden realized many things the federal government do are essential to our daily lives. You can't just immediately burn that all down without some consequences. So there is an element of pushback and a backstop that comes from public opinion, but also from Republicans talking to President Trump and saying, look, we need some of this stuff. So let's see how that plays out over the next few weeks when this flood the zone strategy will continue.
Are you as supportive that the public has a voice here to change
Well,
things?
I think we're being too generous when we talk about the rule of law, right? We might be a little bit too generous because there's a body of people who are now living a life where the rules are there are no rules, those are the rules. Yeah. The rules are there are no rules, those are the rules. And let's not underappreciate the legacy of Mitch McConnell and how he stacked the courts, right? And so it would be like bad theater almost, Kafkaesque, if it wasn't so dangerous and real. But I do have faith in the tight margins in Congress to some degree. I do have a little bit of faith in the tight, and I think those will be the margins that may save some of our institutions from becoming completely destabilized. That's my hope.
Lisa, some of our supporters here in some of Trump's supporters here in Central New York, this is what they wanted?
No, there's no question. And I actually think that today, Trump is probably more popular with more people, including some people who didn't vote for him, than he was 2 weeks ago. Because what they see is, they perceive anyway, and maybe they're right to some extent, that at least finally something is happening. Something's being done about uncontrolled immigration. Something's being done about what they see as DEI preferences that are unfair. And something's being done about the bloated federal bureaucracy, which is inarguable, that there are more people working for the federal government than there needs to be. And so, it might be happening in a very ham-handed way, but I got to believe there's a lot of people who are publicly or secretly cheering because they see action, something finally happening.
Even if it's wrong.
Wrong to some, right to some.
Well, and just quickly on this, yes, he's tearing down many of those things and he's hitting those points on DEI and immigration, but many people are suffering and scared from that. And what it's really going to come down to is, are people's lives better? Is he improving the economy? Is the cost of living going down? And he said he would do things about prices on day one. That hasn't exactly happened, right? So
Right.
I think there's a bit of a sense someone's doing something, but we're going to see how that plays out.
I think you're actually giving us if the Democrats are paying attention, what will be the theme of the next presidential election? Basically asking the same question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And you're quite correct. Obviously, 4 years from now, that's going to be the question, are you better off? But there's one other thing that I do want to point out, and you touched upon it a little bit, Barbara, and that is the fact that, in a sense, this has also begun, and I do say begun because I don't think everybody's woke yet, a different type of wokeism. Two, all of the programs that are influenced by the federal budget. How many people really thought about Head Start being influenced by the federal budget? How many people thought about the police? There are many, many programs that people don't think are part or influenced by the federal budget that they're now aware of.
It touches a lot of things in our everyday lives.